Hi, today we're going to talk about miscellaneous punctuation. This is pretty much everything that's left in punctuation we haven't talked about. So we're bundling all these together and looking at how they're used. Let's just get to it. So we're going to start with the dash and the hyphen. The dash is 2 keystrokes, and that's important to remember. If you just type 1, you're just typing a hyphen. It's just like if you're going to write the word 12 or the number 12 and you just type 1 and you don't type the 2, you don't have a 12. So it is one piece of punctuation whenever we put those 2 together called the dash. And if we just do 1, then it's a hyphen. Many word processors will meld your dashes together. The two, these are called on their own, it's called an N dash because it's the size of the letter N. And make it a bigger one, which is an M dash because it's the size of an M. So either one, if your word processor just leaves the 2 hyphens together there, that's no big deal. Or if it melds them together, as long as it's bigger than the hyphen, that's no big deal either. Just remember, when you've got dashes in your sentences, don't put spaces on either side of the dash. So how do we use this dash? Well, the dash emphasizes a particular point. It acts like those commas to set off information. That is kind of the primary way we use it. So it's just like extra information. You identify your extra information. The dash is just more dramatic. Our new dog, here I could have a comma, but I've got a dash, who showed up at our door thirsty and hungry, dash, is quite the little scallywag. So again, that extra information that we use with commas, what this does, because they visually put more space in between those letters, they really point out that extra information. And so if you have something that you really want to stand out, then use those dashes. They're good for that. Another way is if our extra information actually is a list. So we would have commas around our extra information, and then where we have to have commas in our list, we would have more comatose. We would be more comatose because we would have more commas. I was trying to make the joke and I reversed it. Check this out. The groceries that spilled in the car, dash, orange juice, comma, milk, comma, and yogurt, dash, didn't smell so good the next day. So if we used commas, it would be the groceries that spilled in the car, comma, orange juice, comma, milk, comma, and yogurt, comma, didn't smell so good the next day. We could figure it out as readers, but it's a lot clearer with those dashes there. So if you have a extra information that is a list, then one of the ways you can set that off and kind of clarify it for your readers is by using the dashes. You can also use them like a colon. Now remember, with the colon we had to have full sentence over here, and then we could put our colon in. So with the colon, the only way we can do it is by having the sentence first and then the colon and give the list. Now when we use the dash, again, it's more dramatic. It gives more space, more pause. So it's really going to emphasize that list. I have 3 classes today: English, geology, and math. Now that's probably not the kind of sentence I would use that with, but you know, what I want you to get across to you is the fact we could use it the same way as we would a colon. I would put a colon in that one instead of a dash. But take something like this. Here's another way, and again, remember this English, geology, and math is extra information, so it's another way we're setting it off. Take something like this: sun, comma, sand, comma, and relaxation, dash. Those are the reasons they went on vacation. Here, we've got the list first. And if we have the list first, we can't put that colon in there. So what we do is we go to the dash and then give the sentence. So if you want to change things up a bit and put your sentence at the end, then give your list first, do the dash, and then give that sentence. All right, that's pretty much it for the dash. I mean, there are other ways, but those are the kind of main things if you think about it as extra information. The hyphen, one of the ways we use it is to describe a noun. If we have 2 words describing a noun, and those 2 words mean something different when they're together than they do on their own. Take this sentence, for example. The crusty hyphen-faced pirate gave us a dirty look. Well, here's how we would check this. Well, the way we check this is we put these in sentences separately and see if they mean the same thing. The crusty pirate gave us a dirty look. That one works. The faced pirate gave us a dirty look. That only works in context of, do we have some pirates with faces and some without? The faced one versus the non-faced one. I'm not sure. But you can see how when we put those together in the sentence, those two words, crusty faced, almost becomes a word of its own. And since we can't just smash words together, we don't get to be Shakespeare and make up our own words. We put the hyphen between it to show they go together. Another good example of this is something like the super soft mattress. Yes, it is a soft mattress, but there is a difference between a soft mattress and a super soft mattress. A well-developed paragraph. There are developed paragraphs, but we wouldn't say a well paragraph. And a developed paragraph may be slightly different than a well-developed paragraph. So in all of those cases, that hyphen takes those two words that are something different on their own and turns them into something that is unique when we put them together. Often Word, I know well-developed, I often forget to put the hyphen in it, and Word's grammar checker tells me, Kelly, put it in there, and so I say, yeah, okay, thank you. All right. So pay attention to your grammar checkers, to Grammarly, those kinds of things help too. We can also do more than two words. This is like really unusual and would be much more at home in creative writing. The I'm not sure what you want from me. Look, she told us she wasn't interested in joking. I'm not sure what you want from me. Could put quotes around that, and that works too. That actually probably works better. You can put hyphens between them all if you want. It is just describing that look. What kind of look? I'm not sure what you want from me. So the better option is probably to put quotes around it, but we can use hyphens with that too. That is just something you would do more, which is more about wordplay than anything else. And then also we use hyphens to connect fractions and compound numbers. So 2/3 of the cake we paid $23 for. 2/3 would have the hyphen and 23 would have the hyphen. And that again, I'm teaching you these formal rules so that if you're writing for somebody who is crazy picky about all the formalities, you know how to do it. All right, up next, parentheses. Now, we're going to use parentheses in our citations, but outside of documentation, we want to be very careful with parentheses in our college and professional writing. They can be overused. They do include supplemental material and minor digressions, so it's totally extra. It is extra information is what it really is. The sentence should be grammatically correct without it. In the same way, when we use commas, extra information. So here's an example. My alma mater, school I graduated from, NMSU, go Aggies, is a great school. So there, this makes sense to use it because NMSU is extra information. And then I've got the Go Aggies, which is really just this little aside. It's about fun. It's about amusement, things like that. And that's really the degree to which that stuff you put in parentheses should be extra. So don't use parentheses unless it's like a really extra. Okay, extra. And here's my metaphor. Would you use a chainsaw to slice off a pat of butter? No, you wouldn't. And that's really using parentheses just to put it around regular extra information doesn't work. So do be careful. All right. We can also use them, and these are in again, I'll remind you, formal writing, whenever you're labeling items in a series. When you turn in an essay, make sure to do at least 3 things. 1, and we put that in parentheses, proofread carefully. 2, in parentheses, format carefully, comma, and 3, in parentheses, have it ready on time. Now, if you're tempted to do this, ask yourself, do you really need the 1, 2, 3? In this sentence, it says do at least 3 things. Proofread carefully, comma, format correctly, comma, and have it ready on time. We really don't need the 1, 2, 3. So this would be for formal writing, but it's also something that you'll rarely use. Now we're moving on to brackets. So brackets are those square parentheses, and they enclose words you insert in a quote to clarify or smooth out the grammar and wording. So if you're going to clarify something, you're going to smooth it out, then we're going to use those brackets. Here's another quote from Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein said, comma, quote, try not to become a person, person's in brackets, of success, but rather try to become a person, again in brackets, of value. Now that's in that because his original quote is, try not to become a man of success, but rather try to become a man of value. Maybe I want to change that so that it is much more open to everybody. I mean, I was raised on the King James Bible, and so I get it man, mankind, like everybody, but I want to just go general. Let's open it up more. So I put those brackets in there to change that. Now, you've got to be careful. Whenever you start changing quotes, one, you make any change inside your quotation marks. When you're quoting something, you need to let readers know you made the change. That is your obligation and your duty. So that's very important. The other thing is, don't make changes that change the context or the meaning, right? If I find out that Albert Einstein was, a horrendous chauvinist, and when he said that, he really meant just men, then I don't want to change that quote. I may want to comment on that. I may want to find someone else to quote. It doesn't matter either way, but I'm not going to change it and create this sense of something different than what he said. He said man, I would assume, because he was talking about mankind, people in general, male, female, whatever gender. So that's the thing with brackets. If you change something in a quote, we're obligated to show that we've changed it. It's not in the original. And that's what those square parentheses, those brackets do. They say, look, there's something different here. So here's another way you could do it too. Sometimes, and sometimes it'll be for grammar's sake so that it fits in with your sentence. But here's another way. Sometimes there are typos and mistakes in books and quotes you want to use. Well, if you're getting a grade, do you want your teacher to say, mark you points off on that when it was someone else's mistake? No. So we put in the word sick. It's Latin for, my assumption is I didn't make that mistake. And we put in italics to show where there's an error in something you've quoted. They were, and here's our quote, harmoniously abandoning themselves to the rhythm of the music, like two small chips. Wait, sick, there's our brackets with sick in it, being tossed about on a rough but friendly sea. And that's from Theodore Dreiser's An American Tragedy. That's his 1925 version. That should be ships. Now, I need to know, if I'm going to say this is wrong, I need to know that it is wrong. And you can look at Dreiser's other versions, other editions of his book, and see that corrected in other places. So we know it is wrong. The other way we could handle it is we could just change the word. They were, quote, harmoniously abandoning themselves to the rhythm of the music, like two small ships, and there I put it in the brackets, being tossed about on a rough but friendly sea. And so there I'm just making it easier for the reader to read. So why would I do one or the other? Well, if I was going to write a paper, because especially English majors do this kind of thing, about typos that have been made and like how they got made or whatever, something about typos, then I'm going to want to leave it there and put sick to show there's the typo. If there's a mistake in something and you're not really sure what it meant to be, but you still get the idea of the quote, I would first probably go with just paraphrasing. But if you want to give some of the quote, then you could use sick in that case. Here, I change it in the brackets. I just change chips to ships and correct it, but I show that I corrected it. And if something like this, I'd rather do this because I really want people to be thinking about the content and the idea more than I do the fact that there was a mistake. So if there is a mistake, you can put sick in there. Now, mistakes don't count for things like British spellings, color with the U, flavor with the U, theater with an E. We did that to ourselves. Daniel Webster, in making the first American dictionary, decided that American English should be different from British English, so he took out a lot of letters and put some others in, and that's why we spell things differently. You don't need to put that. It's assumed that readers, will understand American English, British English, that kind of thing. So you don't need to put sick after those. But if there is a typo, a misspelling, something like that, you can put it in there and it says, don't count points off on me. I didn't make the mistake. That person over there did. But the other thing is you can also use those brackets and just change it to the correct word as long as you know what the correct word is. All All right, brackets or parentheses to enclose a translation, just be consistent. So if you are writing in English and then you put words in another language in there, one of the ways you can do it is with brackets or parentheses. You can also do it with commas. By this point, we've probably already read Papi Huero, the emblematic essay, and we saw Ruben do that in a number of different ways, and a number of other writers too. But here's an example. Some of my first words in Spanish were tortillas con mantequilla, tortillas with butter. Now I'm hungry. We put that tortillas with butter in parentheses. So either way is acceptable. If you are enclosing translations and you want to use brackets or you want to use parentheses in a paper, whatever you do, just if you're doing it more than once, use the same ones all the time. Don't go back and forth. All right, now the ellipsis mark. One of the key thing to remember about the ellipsis mark is it is 3 periods put together, but those 3 make one piece of punctuation. Just like that 12, we can't just write 1 and expect everybody else to see the 2 there and think it's 12. It's not going to happen. The question mark, we don't have the top of it, the little curly Q, without the dot underneath. The semicolon is a comma with a period on top of it, but without a period on top of it, it's just a comma. So ellipsis mark is one piece of punctuation, and that's why one of the key things is we never want those separated across lines. They all go together, okay? So you want to make sure they all appear in the same line and you don't begin a line with an ellipsis. Now, you use it to show a drifting pause, and notice down here, that's only in creative works. I was saying ... What was I saying? Something like that. So very informal essays, if you're writing a blog post, something like that. But otherwise, you want to avoid that usage of it in formal essays. And I'll show you the other way we use it. Well, we use it when we leave something out of a quote. And so that's really what we're looking at in this class for the most part. Now, here are 2 examples, the same quote. This is Harlan Ellison. And you can see that in one of them, people on the outside think there's something magical about writing. There's the end of our line, and there's ... Oh, and at the first of the line, dot. But remember, this is one punctuation. It would be like separating the comma from the semicolon on 2 different lines. So technically you should have dot, space, dot, space, dot, space. If it's going to do that weird thing where it puts your ellipses, any part of it, at the first of the line, then get rid of those spaces. If you have to space over to put that word plus the ellipses, they should go together, the word right before it, at the first of the line. And here you can see people on the outside think there's something magical about writing, ... But it isn't like that. You sit in the back of the typewriter and you work, and that's all there is to it. And that's Harlan Ellison, a great writer. So, yeah, let's just work. Don't use an ellipses. Now, when you use it to leave words out of a quotation, don't use it at the beginning of a quotation. It will be clear if you have started with, you're giving a full sentence or not, for one, if you have that, if you have the he said, she said, if you're quoting a full sentence, you're going to capitalize that anyway. If you got that colon and you've got a full sentence and you're going to give a quote, if that is the start of your sentence, you're going to capitalize it anyway. So if you're taking some of the first words out and just integrating it into your sentence, then it's going to be clear. Charles Hudson pointed out that, and remember that was from the quotation mark slideshow. Charles Hudson pointed out that, and then quote, the prisoners escaped by. And so, it was Charles Hudson pointed out the prisoners escaped, and then we had quote, by doing this. And so it's clear, he didn't start the sentence with by because it would have been capitalized anyway. So you do not need the ellipsis point, ... at the beginning of a quote, even if you left, you're just quoting part of a sentence. If you have to quote some words from the end, then here are the rules. And this is just like with those apostrophe and the S's at the end of words that end with S. These are the rules. MLA requires it. So again, MLA, we're all about the rules of grammar. We like punctuation. We're English teachers, all that kind of stuff. So just more, the merrier. So you cut some words from the end of a quote, then you would do ... Chicago does not. So if you're writing in history, they're like, APA says only if it could lead to misinterpretation. My best advice for you in general is think about who you're writing for. If you're writing for someone very strict, then just look it up, come back to kelli.ninja, click on the miscellaneous punctuation slideshow, hit that part, and there's your rules. Make a note of it somewhere, take a picture, whatever. If you are putting them at the end, though, to show that you're leaving off, they need to go in brackets because you've added them in, right? If I take words out of a quote and I put those ellipses in there, the quote should still make sense together. Who's to say whether the author did it that way or I did it that way? So if I do it that way, if you do it that way, put them in brackets. So remember, brackets always show, here's something that I changed. I added into this quote or I shifted. And so we've got to show those brackets. So here's examples. If you delete a couple of words from the middle of a quoted passage, use the ellipsis. If you delete a sentence or more, use the ellipsis and a period. So instead of having dot, space, dot, space, dot, we're going to have dot, space, dot, space, dot, space, dot, unless those spaces mess up our wrapping, okay? Because you're inserting the ellipses and then you're also showing like there's a period there that you left out more. So here's an original quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. What strength belongs to every plant and animal in nature? The tree or the brook has no duplicity, no pretentiousness, no show. It is with all its might and main what it is and makes one and the same impression and effect at all times. So there we go. We've got 1, 2, 3 sentences there. Let's say I just want to take a little bit of that and quote it. I might just decide I want to have what strength belongs to every plant and animal in nature. Okay, cool. But I want to leave out the tree or the brook has no duplicity, no pretentiousness, no show. Well, that's a whole sentence. So there I'm going to put the brackets, and then I'll put my ellipses, dot, 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 and then close my brackets, and then put in my period. And that shows that I left the whole thing out because I've got that period there. And then I want to say it is what it is and makes one and the same impression and effect at all times. And Emerson said it is with all its might and main what it is. And I like that. That's pretty, but maybe I just want to trim it down and be more straightforward. So again, since I'm just leaving out with all its might and main, just a phrase, not a whole sentence, then I'm going to put my ellipses, dot, 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 and it has the brackets around it to show I put it in there. So if you leave out words in a quote, you want to use a quote, and of course, the words you leave out, don't leave out words that change the meaning. There, I'm just leaving out kind of some of the bigger details. They're not always that important to what you're saying in your paper. So if you need to kind of trim something down and leave some things out, just make sure you show that you did that using the ellipses and of course putting those in the brackets so that it's clear you did that and not the author. Now we come to the slash. We're getting close to done here. The slash separates 2 or 3 lines of poetry or a song you've quoted in your text. So if you have a quote in your text, shorter than whatever's required to be indented for MLA, APA, or Chicago, what you're going to do is you want to make sure and put a slash between the end of one line in the poem or song and before the next one. And in this case, we're going to have a space before and after the slash. Basically, poetry and song, they're dependent on line. Where one line ends and another one starts makes a difference in the rhythm and the movement, the style. So whenever we're just quoting 2 to 3 lines, that would be 2 to 3 lines in MLA or up to 40 words in, I'm not sure what APA says about poetry. I never taught literary stuff and had people do APA. But anyway, what I would look it up, whatever they say, if it's just in with our text, right, it's not that indented quote, it's that longer quote, then we need to show here's where one line ends and here's where the other begins. So we're going to put that slash in there. And here's the example. I like these words by Sir Philip Sidney. Check it out. I got a full sentence. I got a colon, quote, biting my truant pen, comma, beating myself for spite. Boom, there's my slash. That's the end of one line. Fool, said my muse to me, look in thy heart and write. And so what that does is that shows us that here's one line and here is the other. And the same goes for a song. So if you were quoting a song and you're going to give more than one line, you're going to do that. In MLA, once you get to line 4, then you're just going to enter and indent it over. In APA, 40 words, or we would double check with citing poetry and song in MLA. I mean in APA, pardon me. Unless you're quoting poetry or using a slash in a quote, avoid using the slash as much as possible in formal writing, especially for that he, she, his, her. And we talked about that way back with pronouns. The fact that that becomes very repetitive. He, she, his, her. And if you are doing formal writing, don't do the slash. Do he or she, his or hers. Make your paper longer. Hey, it doesn't help a lot, but it helps a little bit. Four spaces every time. So if you're doing formal writing, write that. Instead of writing the slash, do the or. There are some times, of course, we do use things like to say it was an either or situation. That is something that we would use a slash for, and there's no space between the slash and the end of either the beginning or. Next time you can bring in coffee and or cookies. The only thing you want to make sure is that and or both work in that situation, because and means both, or means one or the other. So does it make sense? If I say next time you can bring coffee and or cookies, that's cool, because next time you see me, you can bring coffee, you can bring cookies, you can bring just coffee, or you can bring just cookies. Either way, we're all good. So if you mean all of the options, that and or works, and you will put that slash in there for that. Check that out. This is the last of our grammar videos. So that means by this point we have gone over the basic rules of all the punctuation marks, the major kinds of things that people make mistakes with or struggle with in terms of grammar. You now know the rules. It doesn't mean you have them memorized, doesn't mean you even need to memorize them, but you know them, we've gone over them. Please continue to ask questions about them, but also know that just because you know the rule doesn't mean in the end that you're going to learn the rule and do it perfectly in that moment. So you are edumacated. You're able to take these rules and really start breaking them like an artist.